if you're working in any number of industries these days, it's hard not to have heard of blockchain and the various utopian uses that it could be applied to. Richard J. Self here is the Senior Lecturer in Governance of Advanced and Emerging Technologies at the University of Derby. Richard, you've been looking at the various different uses and applications and theories around blockchain. What are your thoughts on the emergence of this trend over the last couple of years?
I think the fundamental thing is it is a political development to develop systems that can manage and transfer assets without regulation, without intermediaries. And it's now developing into other ideas in terms of other assets, whether it's owning your own house, owning the rights to your music, and then getting payment for it without other people being involved. The complete disintermediation of our activities without regulation. That's a fundamental of what went on in the creation of the original blockchain, which was implemented as Bitcoin.
And there are any number of people suggesting any number of uses for blockchain. You mentioned in your talk that some of these use cases may find some business benefits, but there are a number that may fall uncomfortably, unsuccessfully, or may already have done so. Where are the uses going to be particularly good for blockchain, and where do you think they're overreaching?
I think that today we do not know where blockchain is actually going to be effective long term. We know that Bitcoin and many of the 1,500 cryptocurrencies are in use, that people are using them. The majority of the use, of Bitcoin is either as an investment asset, which has very high value. Last year went up to $20,000 a Bitcoin. It's now down at $6,000. So it's used as an investment. It is also used for purchasing small things, big things. There are super wealthy people using Bitcoin to buy cars, occasionally through people who've set up the business to do that. But an awful lot of cryptocurrencies are used for illegal purchasing of illegal goods and services. A lot of the hacker business is done in blockchain, under the cover, out of sight, which is what led to many banks banning or prohibiting the conversion of Bitcoin back into sterling or dollars in your own accounts, because they could see what was going on. So we got those areas which are very heavily used, but will probably last for quite a long time. However, outside of that, it is yet to become clear where any of the proposed use cases will actually solve real business problems. They solve part of a problem, but probably not the real problem that is actually in that sector.
So what are the things that businesses who may inevitably be already considering this, what sort of things do they need to bear in mind, and what problems are yet to be resolved in these issues?
Well, they first of all need to think very carefully about what their business is today, how their IT systems actually operate. They'll need to think about how old and legacy they are, because, for example, supply chain management. We have had fairly effective supply chain management through big ERP systems like SAP and the other ERP systems. And you'll need to look very carefully at what are the current problems. And then you'll need probably to make a fairly significant investment as an R&D exercise alone, recognizing, as with R&D, it might or it might not work, to explore uses of blockchain, which, remember, is purely a messaging system which is very secure. It is exactly like the database transaction journal. It is nothing more and nothing less than a journal. And to think about what needs to go around the outside of that secure communication system, with massive replication of the data around the various participants, and then see where the blockchain technology can actually make a difference. Again, recognizing that blockchain tends to be slower in messaging than our current systems, and that there is a latency between the transaction happening and the various validating sites actually finally confirming this. And that can be an interesting problem. Today, our messaging systems on the supply chain happen nearly instantaneously. The message goes through, our systems pick it up. It's our control how quickly our message queue is handled. But blockchain may not handle things as fast as that. So you have to think about reality.
Oh, you're talking about the various uses of blockchain, including the ability to have it as a register of assets. What are the benefits and the negatives of that sort of approach?
The benefits are that it doesn't require the creation of a large, for example, land registry system with paperwork and all those sort of things. And so for developing countries, it is being explored as a way of relatively rapidly, relatively cheaply implementing a property register. And that once everything gets into it, then ownership is proven to live with person X or Y. The problem is person X or Y then needs to retain their 64-character hexadecimal digit automatically generated identity code for life. If you lose that code, you have lost access to your assets. We see it already with blockchain, with Bitcoin. There are 4.5 million Bitcoins which are no longer in circulation because people do not have their IDs. They connect back to that. What's that? That's about $240 billion worth of Bitcoin is now inaccessible. And if it's your house and you lose that access, this is kind of difficult, I suggest, if not embarrassing. I do not have the ability to prove the ownership of this house. I therefore cannot sell it. And there are many, many other examples like that where you think, I've lost the code, now what? And the answer is tough, it's gone.
So we're here at Software Testing Conference North in York. I mean, you could give this talk to any number of audiences, and maybe you have, but what do you think the specific value of this information is for the testing community, both now and in the near future?
I think the session after me was about performance matters, and so one of the biggest questions that is going to be involved in testing blockchain solutions is, does the performance of blockchain in a realistic network, not a test network, but a realistic network, actually deliver the speed performance that's required? And then you can sort of add on other aspects around, are there technical mechanisms for recovery of your ID in a way that with our banks or our security systems at work, we can easily get our passwords reset, we can get our identity reset if necessary. Are there technical ways that this can happen? Otherwise, people will not use these things. Well, as soon as they start learning, they lose assets very easily. And so I think testing, because we now know that security and performance must be the two key non-functional requirements that go in before you start designing functionality, something that we never knew about 40 years ago. Now we know how critical these are. I think these are a couple of areas that the software testing experts should bring to the software development teams to make sure that some of the critical issues are thought about very, very early. And this will be part of the experimentation. Is performance adequate? Is performance as fast as? Because we know of other examples where big systems have been implemented and the overall process doubles or triples with our new modern software. And testing is a way of preventing that sort of very, very embarrassing egg-on-the-face situation.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you very much.